I think we should bring in the man of the hour. His name is Larry Kudlow, National Economic Council Director. I was expecting to see a huge grin on the man's face this way. There you go.
There it is.
There you go. Look, Larry, I said this is spectacular. It's a Goldilocks report. You want to add to that?
Well, look, it's another blowout number. And, you know, it follows the 3.2% GDP, which itself was a blowout number last week. You've got a very strong economy. And again, I'll say what you and I have talked about. President Trump's policies of tax cuts, deregulation, opening energy, trade reform, stable dollar, and so forth. He is rebuilding this economy. I heard your guest talking about productivity surging. That's hugely important. Maybe we'll get to that. Today's jobs number reflects that. And here's a very key point I want to make, Stuart. With 3.2% growth and 263,000 jobs, which continues the strong trend, we have no inflation, virtually no inflation. You have strong growth with virtually no inflation. I think the inflation measure for the first quarter was 0.9%.
Yep.
The year-to-year is about 1.4. So that's an important point. Very strong growth, very low inflation. Supply-side policies are working.
Can I just bring up what I think is one big negative here? You've got very strong growth, a terrific employment market, and yet you've still got an $800 billion deficit in this fiscal year. That's not supposed to happen, Larry. Strong growth, you should be bringing that deficit down, and it's $800 billion. What do you say?
Well, by the way, give me another year or two on the deficit, because I noticed the CBO put out its own estimates, you know, but they have very low growth assumptions and hence very low revenue assumptions coming from low employment. We don't agree with that. Their models are their models, but our view is 3% growth plus. So, look, what I'm saying is, as a share of GDP, we will cycle down that budget deficit in the years ahead. And actually, I've been following the numbers with the help of my pal Dan Clifton, and revenues are coming in very strong. And so we'll see. I think those deficit numbers will be much better. But the key point here, I mean, you got a 10-year government bond rate or government note rate, Stu. That's what, 2.5%?
Yep, 2.5.
It doesn't look like a deficit panic to me. The main point is economic growth continues strong. If you take your productivity, whatever, call it 2.5% last 4 quarters. Your growth in employment, at least 1%. It's actually stronger than that. We're now in a 3 to 4% growth zone. And that's a huge change just in a couple of years. Again, I would argue because the president's policies on taxes and regulations and so forth are rebuilding the economy. So this is a very, very good story. Good growth, low inflation. And I would say this, to echo the president periodically says this, I think we can do even better. In other words, folks are telling me it's going to slow down from here. I don't buy it. I think as the capital deepening from the business tax cuts continue, you are going to see stronger growth, more capital goods, better productivity, and continued increases in real wages and jobs. It's a very good place to be.
I just want to delve into politics for a second, Larry. I know you're the economics guy, but I just want to talk politics because we had a speech from Joe Biden this week. Producer, I want the second soundbite, okay, the one that deals with the tax cuts. Joe Biden says, look, you've had this whopping great big tax cut. Most of it's gone to the rich and to business. And you, America's middle class, are not feeling it. You've not seen it. I'm just going to roll that soundbite for a second, Larry. Then I want your comment. Roll the tape, please.
The stock market is roaring, but you don't feel it. There was a $2 trillion tax cut last year. Did you feel it? Did you get anything from it? Of course not. Of course not.
I think you heard that, Larry. Would you deal with it, please?
Well, listen, all the many times I interviewed Joe Biden down through the years in another TV show on another network, heaven forbid, I was never really able to convince him of the merits of the incentive model of growth and why lower marginal tax rates improve growth for everybody. Look, here's a fact. This is very important. The strongest growth in jobs has come from the blue-collar sector. It is not the upper end. In fact, the wage increases, the bulk of the wage increases, faster wage growth, is not the upper end. It's the blue-collar, middle-class, working folks. Actually, the 10%, the 10th percentile has been the leader, not the top 1 percentile. So I think Joe Biden's got to get his facts right, and he might want to re-examine our policies. We're getting done what we hope to get done. Manufacturing is rebounding. All right, and if we get these trade deals, particularly USMCA, which I think is going to be very bullish for economic growth and investment, we will see continued surge in auto workers, farmers, manufacturing, and so forth and so on. But that's the sweet spot. It's not the upper end. It's the middle class folks, the working folks, the hard hats. Those are the ones I love. I love the hard hats.
So can you give me a forecast for the rest of this year? Do you think we're going to get 4% growth in any quarter this year? Do you think we're going to get an unemployment rate below the current 3.6% rate at any point this year? 4% growth, below 3.6 unemployment at any point this year. Will you forecast that?
I will say there are strong probabilities that that may occur. It's a great scenario. We're going to call it the Varney scenario. I like this very, very much.
Thank you.
I'm a nonpartisan, bipartisan kind of guy, and whatever you say is really important. Look, all I want to say again, you've got 3.6% unemployment, big job gains, 263, GDP growth of 3.2, and Stu, here's the key point, virtual price stability, high growth, high jobs, low unemployment rate, low inflation. That's the message that we've been trying to send, and I think those were the policies, the supply-side policies to rebuild the economy are working. A lot of these old models from various institutions around Washington, D.C., I would never want to name names, have missed this. They don't believe it. They should, because the numbers are bearing that out. So to your scenario, the Varney scenario, yeah, we could see a 4% growth rate with less than 3.6% unemployment. There's no Phillips curve going on here. Growth is good. Higher wages are good. More jobs are good. Low unemployment is good. Working successfully is good. This is a sweet spot. I hope folks take notice.
You've got to be disappointed that Stephen Moore has withdrawn from consideration at the Federal Reserve Board. I, for one, do not understand why a man's personal life in the past should have any influence on his position and his ability to characterize monetary policy. Your comment, please.
Well, I do think it's unfortunate. He withdrew because of these personal attacks, which have nothing to do with his excellent record and analysis as an economist and a policy analyst. You're right. It's too bad. You know, I'll give one thing here. Steve Moore's view, which is coincident with our view, he's winning the battle of ideas, which is, again, to suggest that strong economic growth can coexist with low inflation. And in fact, as Steve tried to say, and I will echo this is a long-held view of mine, and Art Laffer and others, and the president's for that matter, these incentives for low tax rates and deregulation are working. They're working. So this is the kind of non-inflationary growth with a stable currency, the dollar. The money is pouring into the USA from all over the world. So I think Steve wins the battle of ideas. He will live to fight another day.
Well, do you want the Federal Reserve to cut rates? The president wants the Federal Reserve to cut rates and cut rates now. You want to do that?
Well, I think the point is, with these low inflation numbers, I think the Fed is actually looking at rate cuts. I mean, some of which were priced into the market maybe up until a few days ago.
You think they'll cut rates after a jobs report like that?
Well, look, Fed's independent. I'm not going to outguess their timing. They're going to do what they're going to do on their own time. What I'll say is, again, using the analysis, what we found is that all these incentives in the economy, creating strong growth in jobs with no inflation. And the Fed is looking at the inflation numbers. And I don't think they're inclined to fine-tune real GDP. I think they are inclined to think low inflation might suggest the need for lower interest rates, their target rate. I myself believe that is the case. The president does too, as you noted. So the Fed's looking at inflation. That's a good way. Our views right now, intellectually, are not really far apart from the Federal Reserve, best I can determine.
So, you were proven right. You were on this program many times in the past, and I was a skeptic, Don't call this the Varney scenario, because it's not. I was a skeptic. I did not think that we could get 3% growth in the first quarter, but you've consistently said that we could. And now you're on the program saying there's a good chance of 4% growth and below 3.6% unemployment at some point in this calendar year. Last word to you.
Every 10 or 15 years, Stu, I really get it right. Every 10 or 15 years, I really nail it.
Do you remember when I first met you? I remember meeting you in the Plaza Hotel in New York City about 1982 when you worked with Ronald Reagan at the Treasury. And I remember it distinctly because I've known you ever since.
Well, I was in OMB, but yes.
Oh, sorry.
Look, you and Lou Dobbs, I was your Washington correspondent. You remember that? Yes. You made me get up. I think I was on the air at 6:30 in the morning.
You got mad as hell at me because I woke you up in the middle of the night and you said you'd never speak to me again. And look at us now.
And Lou, who's an old friend of mine, wouldn't give me any money for that. He said he'd send me a box of cigars. I'm still waiting for the box of cigars.
I'll have a word with him, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Sir, it was a pleasure. Thanks very much for being with us. Larry Kudlow.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks very much indeed.